All right. Yeah. So, welcome everyone. So we're going to talk about the new stuff in Neon, and basically we've called it the Eclipse IDE and the ecosystem around it, meaning that all the cool projects that are kind of around the Eclipse platform, and that includes CDT or PHP tools and things like that. So we'll kind of take a look at the new cool things and see what's new there. Let's start this. All right, so the plan is we'll take some quick looks at the high level in the introduction of how Eclipse itself is aggregated, how all this kind of relatively big number of projects are brought together and produced. And then we'll show some cool stuff of the IDE itself, like new features, like stuff that you can click and see, and this is what we will demo. And then we have some cool technical approaches, that's sort of like long-term plans that we are looking into exploiting, like Eclipse on the web or SWT, GTK level CSS and things like that, which are basically under investigation and might be a thing in the future. And then some high-level initiatives like new extra releases and things like that. So that's more or less the plan. So yeah, Mickael will give you an introduction.
Thank you. So before we start into getting into the new and noteworthy for Neon, we'd like just to remind you, if you don't know already, how the Eclipse IDE is produced and what concretely is the Eclipse IDE. So the Eclipse IDE is when you get an IDE package, you get some features that are relevant for your use case and their transitive dependencies. Those are produced by Eclipse projects. There are 82 projects contributing to the IDE, and depending on which package you choose, you get a different set of projects. So here is a small graph of a dependency maze. It's actually way more complicated than it is here, but you get the principle. And in terms of workflow, what happens is that every Eclipse project willing to contribute to the Eclipse IDE contributes their build, their P2 repository, to what is called the simultaneous release aggregation that you can see here. And the simultaneous release produces a big simultaneous release repository, which is the one you have enabled in your IDE by default. So here it will be releases/neon. Current one is releases/mass. And from this big aggregated repository containing all IDE-related projects in the simultaneous release, the EPP project, Eclipse Packaging Project, takes some description file to generate the packages that then you can download. And those packages are also accessible through the oomph installer, which is kind of proxying the product definition and the simultaneous release repository. So it's really a contributive and aggregated approach.
All right, so thanks for the sort of overall introduction. So let's start with the new stuff in Eclipse. First and foremost, first thing you see when you run Neon is a splash screen, and we got a cool new splash screen. It looks like like this neon stripes, and everyone likes it. So let's start with platform level. And yeah, we spent part of the, this FEEP, what we call the Friend of Eclipse, sort of contribution program, and a nicer welcome page is one of the results of this initiative. And basically, it's a new welcome page which has got a facelift, and it has nicer. You see nicer view. I don't have many plugins here because it's the SDK, but if you have like the bigger packages like JEE and things like that, you will find way more things in the welcome page. But you can of course go through the tutorials and whatever you could do on the old splash screen, but now with much more, and you can see it will take you to the guide and help and things like that. But the sort of the first thing is the fact that it has kind of a new theme. It's called the Solstice theme. This was work from Brian DeAlwis, and basically also funded by the FEEP program. And yeah, this is basically sort of the first thing, or the second thing after the splash screen that you see. the dark theme improvements, yeah. So there have been a lot of these. I personally don't like having a dark background, but it seems that lots of people in Eclipse like it, so we have spent quite some effort taking care of the details of how the dark theme looks in Eclipse and in Windows, Linux, and Mac. And part of it was also funded by the fee program, so we're quite happy with that. Let me show you how it looks in Fedora, for example. So it was basically we required, or we made the patch to sort of ask for the support of the operating system, and we also have now, if you like things that previously were unscrollable, like unstylable, sorry, like the scroll bar or the table headers in the yeah, I don't have any table here, but yeah, so the table headers and things like that previously were kind of unstylable, but now we've made progress in sort of asking for the operating system help. So now in the Linux version, for example, there is a patch, or there is code, which basically when you switch here in the preferences, it also asks the operating system to switch for this specific application to the dark variant of the Adwaita theme that is in Fedora by default. So yeah, you can see it looks much better than it looked in Luna or in Mars or yeah, of course we didn't have it in previous version. But basically we're kind of happy with the progress that we made here. On the Windows side, there was also quite some improvements, and this is where the fee program went in from Fabio, which did quite some nice work on the Windows operating system. So yes. As I said, I don't really understand people that like dark themes, so I also made a patch which disables theming completely. So, I mean, on the serious note, I think it's definitely reasonable for some people to just disable the Eclipse level theming and just ask the operating system, give me whatever you have. I don't want CSS, I don't want anything. I don't want round corners, I don't want anything. Just give me whatever you get from the operating system in widgets. So this was possible before, but you needed some very complex, well, not very complex, but you needed like a command line parameter in the launcher to do it. But now we have a fancy way of doing it in the UI. Let me switch back to GTK theme. Yeah, so now this is normally styled Eclipse, but if I go here and say, just get rid of this stuff, I don't really care anymore. You have to restart. And this basically prevents, it basically disables the platform level the platform level styling of Eclipse. It basically stops at the SWT level. So you can see here, these are plain. So if you start a simple SWT application, you get this kind of tab, like the C tab folder or tab folder, or you see the tabs are now kind of square, they don't have round corners, the colors are much simpler, and things like that. So I use it like this most of the time, because I really like it like this. But yeah, this is just for people that don't like the super fancy styling on top of this, on top of like multiple layers of styling. This has an added advantage of being a bit faster, because basically the CSS engine is completely out of the way. It's totally bypassed on the platform UI level. You just tell it like, I don't need it, and it's null in the context, so it's basically, it saves some processing power and some memory, so it's kind of, it has an impact on that also. Let me get back to it, because I think this is not very popular with developers, but personally I really like it. Let me give this a restart. Next. Yes, the control 3. This was also, I mean, in every presentation I see that mention controls 3, everyone complains that not enough many people know about control 3. So hopefully by now people see it and kind of know that it's sort of like the super duper kind of search box in Eclipse. Whatever you need, if you know what it is called, then you can definitely find it in the quick access, basically. So you think like, yeah, what do I need? An error happened, so I want to see the log, so you type error, and it says log. Or if I say I want to create a new package, and you see here new package. Yeah, the resolution is not that good here, but you can basically, you get the idea. The improvements here were made into, so you can now, so if you have something like, you see here there's commands, there's menus, and there are also views, so now you can filter. You can say I want in the views. So it gives you now matches only for the views, because sometimes if you type some short string, it will give you like 30 matches. So if you just want it for some specific subgroup of the Eclipse, like say metaphors, which are commands, menus, views, and all that perspectives and things like that, then you get this sort of added value here, which is nicer. And there were also some improvement in the performance of the search and how responsive that is. And also on the sizing, there were some issues if there are multiple monitors and things like that. So there's quite some improvements here on the platform level, let's say. Wordwrap, yeah, this is also a funny one. People have been requesting this for ages by now, and we finally have it in Neon. So basically, if you, everyone knows what Wordwrap is, so there's not much use in. So if you do this, and this is with no Wordwrap. Did I crash it? That's funny. Yeah. No. Okay, so Wordwrap is, yeah, so basically, yeah, no, whatever Wordwrap does, yeah, that's, you get it. I mean, it's, we finally have it. By default, it's off, just because, but you can very easily turn it on. And that's something that is also new for Neon. Next, autosave of editors. Yeah, this is also something that was made possible by the FEEP program. So basically now, if you have in the preferences a way of saying, let me find like autosave. Yes, so in the editors you have a way of saying enable autosave of dirty editors, and then you give it a timeout, and then if you are inactive in the IDE for a certain number of seconds, it will basically autosave the editor. I mean, there's not much rocket science in sort of understanding what it does, but there were some issues, and you see the note here because there is a danger, of course, when you save of somehow influencing while something is building and things like that, that you might lose data at some point, and that's like the thing. Whatever we do, it should never have a potential of causing loss of data. So there is also, if you set it this low, very low, and you have a automatic build on, then it will kind of cause to build every second. So if you have to keep this in mind, if you have a very like big workspace and it builds like 200 projects on every save, and that's basically this is what the note says here. So let me turn this on. So I say I'll make a change here, and basically after, you see it automatically saved the editor. I mean, people are worried that, oh, I want it how it was before. I mean, if you are very sort of, you can see in the local history. I'm pretty sure, well, I've heard that people don't know about this a lot, but basically, you see here all the versions of every change that the editor went through in the last, I don't know, half an hour or so. So it's kind of protected in that sense. The launcher. This is also yeah, it was minor, but it was kind of very useful because most of the time, like it really happens that you kind of say, where was the last workspace that I had, and things like that. So you see, you have the here now link with the old workspaces that you used before, and you kind of can click on it, and then Eclipse will restart and will open with a new workspace. And this is a new improvement that we have in Neon. And you have the settings here of copying the workbench layout or working sets or things like that. Yeah, you can also remove if you don't like it here. Next. Yeah, this was also a funny one. You know, it's like the browser metaphor, zooming in or zooming out. It's like, especially for demoing purposes, this is really nice. So it's basically a zoom in and zoom out of the font of the editor, not the Java editor. It's implemented on platform level, so it's basically all the editors in Eclipse, text editors, let's say. And basically now I'm doing Control plus and Control minus, and basically it's zooming in and out, just like you would on a browser. So whether you want huge font or like micro font, then yeah, you can do whatever you wish with it. The import wizard, yeah, you might want to talk about the import wizard.
So part of the Neon release, we tried to work on a difficult user story for new Eclipse users, which is to get started on an existing project. So if you look at various discussions on forums, Stack Overflow, and so on, this is a recurring question of new Eclipse users saying, okay, I installed Eclipse, I want to work on that project, how should I get started? I'm ready to bet that maybe a third of you wouldn't be able to explain it easily to an end user for a generic project, for example. So if you want to get started, you have to go through the new wizard and create the new project, or either find a dedicated import wizard. So that's really a tricky story, and the purpose here was to reverse the way import is done in Eclipse. It's going to take some time. You took a very big folder. But so the user doesn't know in advance what kind of project they are going to work on, and they don't want the workflow to be different according to the project they're importing. So the idea is to first request them what they're importing. So they give the path to Sopot, use this very big Git repository. And then the wizard runs some analysis to suggest what can be imported. So in that case, you see that the project that the wizard found are Eclipse projects, which means that they have a .project file. The strategies to discover and configure a project at import are extensible. So here, Sopot doesn't have M2E on his SDK, but if you have a project with pom.xml, it will say, okay, this is a Maven project, and if you approve, it will be imported as a Maven project. So it's really, by reversing the way import is done, it really removes a lot of stress, let's say, for the end user who doesn't know how to import as best. Here, there is one way to import. It is the recommended one, and it's aimed at being the universal way of importing anything in Eclipse IDE. And people like it at the moment, but we'll wait for Neon to get more precise feedback.
Yeah. Oh, Mickael implemented this himself. So, the JDT, yeah, for the Java development tools, there have been lots of improvements, but we've selected 2 or 3 of them, also for time constraint. This is one of my favorites. Basically, the substring completion. It also was partly done by the code recommender guys, but now it's also in JDT, and now it's also good to discover the method. So if you don't remember whether it was add selection or remove selection or put or set or get or whatever, you just start typing, and if it's part of it's in any location of the string, it will actually find it wherever that is in the. So if I say here new person and then say age, I don't remember whether it's age, set or get or things like that. You see that you get whatever matches as a substring, not just a start of the string. And it used to be just start of the string. And this is very useful. I mean, this is a very simple example, but if you have those crazy method names which have 4 parts, set this over there and here, and then you can just type part of it, and you will actually have and you see the part that matches is bold. I think you can see it from there. Yeah. So this was quite nice.
Does this work with code recommenders as well? Like, is this brand
Now, I think this is implemented on the JDT level, but Code Recommenders is kind of, they have a sort of different way of sort of prioritizing them. They prioritize more or less, they show first whatever is used most according to them. So they kind of have a different way of.
And actually, Code Recommenders did have the substring matching before JDT. So if you have a completion from recommender, it already supports that, but directly in recommender, not through JDT.
Yeah, this was also a funny one. So especially when you build constructors, let me get rid of this. So yeah, I'll delete this. So here, if you have a constructor like this, and then you want these to be fields, then you could do it one by one, but if you have huge constructors, that it would take a while, and sometimes you misclick somewhere because it has to be near the specific argument. But now you can say assign all parameters to field, and it will basically take a guess of the name you need and make them private, because that's what most same people do, and then you just can tab over whatever was completed, and if you want, you can of course make a change. But this is also quite handy if you have methods with big number of arguments, and yeah, that's quite handy in that case. Another one. I think I have another one. Yes. Oh yeah, this is also very nice. So if you don't know, there is this great shortcut in Eclipse for reading code. It's Control-Shift-G, or find references of a method somewhere in a certain scope, whether it's in a project or a workspace or even wider, so in a target platform. So you basically select a method here and says, give me references of this method in the workspace. Now the new thing is, or the new and noteworthy in this now, is that you can, so you see here I'm using setAge, and at this other I'm using getAge and setName, for example. And what you can do now is basically select multiple methods. So you select not just one, and you couldn't do this before. So now you can select setAge, and then also setName, and maybe also getAge, and say, give me a list of references in the workspace for all of these guys, wherever any of this is used. So it's an OR thing, not an AND thing, of course. And then you see both classes and say there are two matches here and one match there, and if you go here, there are these two, and if you go here, there is this one. And this is quite handy if you have a huge code base and you want to kind of read where things are called and where are not called, and things like that. So that's quite something that I wanted to show, because I find this shortcut, this one and the plain text one, which is Control-Alt-G, and Control-Alt-G is basically a plain text. So it doesn't search the AST tree as a method, but it searches the full screen. So even if there is a spelling error, it will just search for the text match rather than a method match. Yeah, I think that's it for the demo part. So, Mickael.
So yeah, you had the luck to be at Eclipse Conference, and at Eclipse Conference there are many talks about Eclipse. And so we will just promote a few talks which are about Eclipse IDE that you may be interested to go and see, because they will get into details of specific progress in some specific domains. The first one will be the one from Sasikant tomorrow in this room about Java 9 in Eclipse. So Eclipse is getting ready to support Java 9, modules, Jigsaw, all the family and complexity that comes with it. And Sasikant will provide details about it tomorrow. Another very good one is about C and C++. So same thing, JSDT has really improved a lot, and many things are going to happen for the pleasure of C++ developers. And Jonah is going to get into details tomorrow in Sopot at noon. So if you like C and C++, that's probably one you should not miss. One which is more in my area of interest and which is very important, in my opinion, is the one about JavaScript by Ilya. So it's tomorrow, it's today in Sopot. Same thing here, JavaScript was, let's say, JavaScript was one of the reasons that many people said bad things about Eclipse in the last years, and this is changing. So if you like JavaScript and web development, you should go and see this talk. Another one, it's about PHP. Eclipse has always have good support for PHP, and this is ongoing with the support for PHP 7 and so on. And Kaloyan will present it today at 11 in the Argos room. And the last one about Eclipse IDE that is quite interesting is the one by Roland about Docker environment in Eclipse. So currently, Eclipse is the best IDE for Docker support. And if you're using Docker, that's something you may want to discover if you're not already aware of it. And Roland will tell you more. So here we only mention projects in the eclipse.org organization, community, I should say. However, we all know, and probably a lot of you are contributing to Eclipse, not directly through eclipse.org projects, by creating your own project, your support for your own problematics. And the ecosystem of Eclipse is by far the main strength. It's what makes it infinity valuable. And so to make it easier for people to consume this ecosystem, this year was introduced a discovery for unsupported file type. So the purpose is you're having an IDE such as Sopot took the SDK package, which is pretty light. But Sopot may want to develop Go file at some time and may not know about some support for Go in Eclipse. So here the idea is that there are some good plugins for Go on Marketplace and user must discover it. So Sopot creates the Go file, and when it creates the Go file, he can start editing on his regular editor, which is the best he has at the moment. And here we'll probably have some demo issues because of the web. Yeah, but so, yeah, what happens is that if you open a file that you don't have support for, a query is run against Marketplace to find a solution which has support for that file. Maybe you can show the slide, and it's going to be enough. There is not much more to see. Yeah. So here, what would have happened if we had a reliable internet connection would be that user will be prompted this pop-up saying, okay, we found something on Marketplace, you should have a look. User can say, no, I don't want this Marketplace. I always want my text editor because I'm a hardcore coder. But normal people are not hardcore coder and like good tools. And if they do that, it will show the Marketplace client with in that case, it will be the GoClipse entry, which has been detected because GoClipse registered the extension for Go, saying, okay, I am a tool that supports Go. So they did the tag file extension _Go, and Marketplace is queried for that tag. And the user is prompted to install GoClipse. So it's really a very good way for users to discover the power of the ecosystem, and more selfishly thinking about the IDE, it's also a very good way for Eclipse to show that there is much more than what is shipped to the user. So this is, in my opinion, a very valuable change. And if you have some Marketplace entries adding support for your own file, whatever it is, just add a tag, it's file extension _ with the file type. So your plugin can be discovered if some user opens the file you can support.
Yeah, that's quite useful, I think. Probably some of you developed some plugin and put it on the Marketplace. And it really grows the visibility, because if some user says, like, I want this extension, then it will pop up to him, to his face, that, hey, it's not by default, but you can get this one. And that's kind of really good marketing anyway. So yeah, packaging. Mickael will go on about some.
For Neon, 2 new persona, let's say, if you're used to UX things and persona. If you don't know persona, a persona is basically a category of user that we kind of target individually. 2 new persona were targeted by this release. Thanks to the JavaScript tools getting usable, we could start Eclipse IDE for JavaScript and web developers with a decent level of features for JavaScript and HTML to get some web developer using Eclipse, which was kind of a nightmare, which is still a nightmare until Neon is released. And the other persona targeted are Android developers. So the ADT project, the Google ADT, was abandoned by Google. It wasn't that good, by the way. And some people from the Eclipse community migrated it to Eclipse, migrated it to Eclipse.org under the name andmore. And this package contains andmore. It's actually usable. It doesn't have the feature set of Android Studio because it's a kind of way smaller project and less strategic one for the contributors at Eclipse than it is for Android and JetBrains. But it's actually usable. I use it for a side project of mine with decent satisfaction. So if you know some people liking Eclipse and Android and who don't want to switch to Android Studio, they now have a good alternative. And as part of the packages that are shipped by default, recently the structure of the dependency was hierarchical, quite strict actually, so you couldn't upgrade some parts of the IDE without upgrading the whole IDE. Projects at Eclipse.org have different rhythm, different requests. Some things such as platform is pretty stable and requires very strong stability, so it cannot release more than a year. I mean, release big features more than a year. Things such as JavaScript have to go pretty fast nowadays. So the package layout was flattened, so users can do incremental updates and update subparts of their IDE if some projects are getting faster and if they want to take advantage of new features sooner than next year. And so I talked about it, a lot of value of Eclipse IDE and Eclipse community as on marketplace. Generally, when the simultaneous release arrives, so when Neon arrives, many projects deliver their new features. And here I put a list of good projects that are on market. I mean, all projects are good, but of popular and business critical, let's say, projects that are on marketplace that will deliver or already have delivered good feature by following the Neon release. So don't just look at Eclipse IDE. Eclipse IDE, it's the base, and go have a look at the other projects on marketplace that will also deliver good things. Maybe you want to do it, Sopot?
Yeah, so this is pretty self-explanatory. So we're pretty much used to having, let's say, Mars, and then Mars SR1, SR2, which is basically bug fixes, or used to be bug fixes on the main release, let's say. And we added another one. You see the dates there. So there's going to be now 3 service releases. And we're trying to kind of, hopefully we'll kind of move away from the service release concept and try to be a bit more flexible in including new stuff. Because the rule up to now has been that whatever is new as a feature will go into the next major, well, not major, but yeah, not the service release, but let's say 4.7. But now we're kind of trying to also put some new features in the service releases, and we're gonna get an extra one. So hopefully that will be a good thing. Now for the future, and this is just a couple of new technical ideas that at least like my team and also Mickael, we have at Red Hat of what we could do on the platform level. The first one, which I want to show you, is quite cool. It's basically running. So GTK now provides a way to run GTK applications, GTK-based applications on the browser now, basically through a different backend. And this means a lot for us because if you are on Linux, you use GTK, you get it for free in Eclipse. No change, nothing. So I've prepared, because this is really dangerous to demo, I've prepared the Docker instance, which kind of doesn't change much. So if I run here a Docker instance, run. So this is basically, for those that are familiar with Docker Hub, I have this on Docker Hub. And well, this is local because I'm not that stupid to download the whole thing now. So let's say run Broadway, of course. So you see it gives you now a web sort of URL, and yeah, if I copy this and go to Chrome and say get out of here, go here and paste, you see this is now Eclipse itself that is running on the browser. So it's basically, it runs reasonably, so just to make sure that you don't see I'm cheating. It's basically a normal Eclipse instance, and you can see I can do new Java project, let's say, and then I say test, and then I say test project, and I say finish, and I very quickly show you editor performance. That's the thing that just for you to have a feeling of how it works on so I say create a Java class, and I say another test class, and then I say main method, and then I say system error, Sopot, and I say run, and yeah, it's basically down there somewhere. Yeah, so the point is that basically this is still a new idea, but basically we're still thinking of what we can do with it. But the important thing is that this is something given to us on the GTK level. That means that your Eclipse application, whether it's an SWT or RCP or a full-blown IDE, this is happening below your level. So you don't have to even change a line of code. It's basically just an environment variable when you run Eclipse and says, don't draw on X11, which is the drawing backend, but draw on Broadway, which means HTML5. So with only this, and of course having the Broadway backend running, which is just a command, a daemon, then you get it running on the web. And this is an idea which we're thinking of how to use, and it's not in any kind of production in Neon, but it's something really cool that we're kind of looking at. And another thing is SWT level styling, which would also be, well, I'll quickly run through it. It's basically styling on the GTK level also, which has been progressing really well in terms of what you can do. And then if you have just this like radius 5 pixels, then you get very cool, let me find. So Alex, my team lead, Alex Kurtakov, made this nice video. So in 2 lines of CSS, you can have really nice animations and coloring of the text boxes. And if you have to do it with, I don't know, CSS and code, this will take like 30 lines of code. But you can also do it now with CSS with the latest GTK versions. And we're also investigating this and how it can help us in the new, in the future, basically, because that was the point.
Yeah. Another idea that is important for textual editor is to start making the Eclipse text editor more aware of other services able to contribute to it. So instead of creating a plethora of editor, just rely on this editor and extend this editor. So part of the topic is to add extension to the text editor to support coloration, completion, contextual documentation, and so on, using language services, which are getting popular with things such as TSS Server or Visual Studio as it. Those are basically services that you can consume via REST or whatever protocol, which do a lot of computation of the code logic. So currently a lot of code, a lot of smartness is in the IDE itself, but nowadays the style is to get the smartness in some services that you can consume to present in the IDE. So the idea is to get the Eclipse text editor able to be a client of those language services. That's a very cool topic. Any help is welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is pretty much it in a sense. So yeah, there is the conference. You want to say
yeah,
anything?
So for the conference on Friday, there is a track dedicated to IDE where we'll at least think, maybe design and even maybe code some good patches to work on important IDE topics. So if you are done conference, come, bring your topics, and we'll see how we can set up some progress on those topics. For example, the one about text editor and language services is one of the topics that we can cover during the conference.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much it for us. Sorry for being a couple of minutes late. Well, we tried to give you like most of what we have in Eclipse, but lots of value is also in those slides, which we told you. It's this talk here, this talk there. That means all the new and noteworthy, you will see more there. Because if we had done them all, it would take us 4 talks in a row. So, any questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah. So if some want to go to coffee right now, it's a break. There is some time. If some want to get a coffee right now, they can go. And if some want to stay for questions, it's fine too. So
yeah, so there is a breakout after this.
So any question?
Want to stay for questions?
Yes.
Yeah, so there have been definitely some improvements of what we could do. I mean, yeah, Tom, there are issues, of course, with some of the styling of the CSS, and this is why we're also looking at alternatives on what we can do. But there was definitely some work that went in the. Mostly, it was the extending the abilities to style, extending the sort of things that you can style with CSS. But there were definitely also Lars and Simon did quite some work in improving the performance. But we also developed, because of this kind of thinking, we also give the chance to people to just disable the CSS engine if you really don't like it. So you have a choice now. There's definitely going work into making it better, because the thing is that you only hear from people that don't like it, and when you're thinking about getting rid of it, and just you get 200 people that say no, don't do it because we are using it and we like it and things like that. So that's so there's definitely work going into improving it. Was another question?
Okay, guys. And is it plans to add autosave on focus lost, not only time-based saves?
And I think not. So there was a lot of discussion on how to implement or what it means that I'm not working with the editor, or when it's the best moment to start counting towards the timeout of the save. And that discussion is more or less closed, and now it's basically inactivity on the editor. So I think, as far as I know, there are no plans on kind of going back to that and reconsidering what it means for starting the counter. I mean, there was lots of work that most of the effort went into making sure that it's not interfering with the workflow, it's not firing something that is synchronous, and it's taking lots of delays. So we're kind of stable into that now.
Yeah, so the fact is that since the feature is new, it will bring some new usage, and maybe save on focus out will be considered when we get users really using it and willing it. At the moment, for this iteration, it was not considered because it has some drawbacks that were identified and that we couldn't ship as a first iteration for successful adoption.
Yeah,
but
Neon,
maybe later.
Yeah, for Neon.0 or the Neon release, there's really no chance. Maybe if there is some like nice feedback or a great idea on how to do it, it will be investigated for later. But right now, there's no plans.
So I have a question about the updates.
Yeah, that's the speaker is working.
With the updates, so you made it flat, but does that mean the individual sites will be contributing P2 update sites to actually check updates from, or do users still have to know to add P2 or enable P2 update sites for that to work?
The EPP packages by default only add the aggregation site. So you will get by default only the content of the aggregation site. So users have to add their content. However, some packages such as the Java IE one or the CDT one, which have good release engineering and good stability, those are very mature projects, add a reference to the CDT or the Java IE tools in the EPP package. So whenever they release a new CDT in the C++ package, users see the update. So it is not recommended to add site directly as an update source in EPP packages. But for example, if you're going to work on some science package where you have some projects you trust are able to deliver good updates without breaking users, it is worth considering adding some this as a source site so user can see update without any effort. But by default, the EPP strategy is to not trust too much contributing projects and not enable an update of whatever. CDT is a mature project, it's version 9 and so on. There are some projects that just break between updates, and this need to be avoided to users. And that's a defensive way, but technically it's doable.
And just to answer your question about autosave, there's a nice little E script, it's about 40 lines long, adds autosave for loss of focus on the editor and on the whole window. So it's only about that much Python code. So if you want that, let me know and I'll show you, I'll put you in the right direction.
Any other questions? No? Thank you
Feel
very
free,
much.
yeah.